Thanks for joining us on a road trip through rabbinic narrative. No agenda, just clarity. When the Meraglim come back and give their report to Moshe and Bnei Israel about what they saw in Eretz Canaan, they say, Eretz Ocheles Yoshveahi, that it's a land that consumes its inhabitants. In trying to explain what the term Eretz Ocheles Yoshveahi means, the Gemara in Sota on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph says the following: Darish Rava expounded. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, it's as if God said, Ani chashavti latova v'hem chashvu l'ra. I consider this a good thing, and they considered it a bad thing. Ani chashavti latova. I consider this a good thing. D'chol heicha dimtu mis chashiva ditu ki hirit intardu v'lo l'sha'alu abasrayu. Because wherever they went, I made an important person die, so that the rest of them would be preoccupied and not notice or inquire anything about the Meraglim. So this is actually the Gemara that Rashi on the Pasuk refers to, and it seems to be pointing out the irony that Hashem arranged events to be that those in charge of the communities would be preoccupied with other things so that they wouldn't notice the Meraglim as they were making their way and scouting the land. But there's an Ika de Amre in this Gemara, which adds another wrinkle to this story. V'ika de Amre, Iyov nach nafshe. So there's another opinion that says that Iyov died, v'trudi kule ama be'esbeda. And the entire world was preoccupied and burdened with his eulogy. Heim chashvu l'ra, but the Meraglim considered this a bad thing, and therefore stated, Eretz Ocheles Yoshveahi. So the question I'd like to take up is, what is the Ika de Amre coming to add? The idea that the Meraglim misinterpreted the events that were going on in Eretz Canaan while they were there is clear enough from Rava's interpretation. Why are we bringing in Iyov here? Are we just coming to give chronological facts here, filling in some historical gaps? It just happens to have been Iyov who's the one who passed away at this time. Additionally, the phrase "ve'etridu kli alma be'espeda" is slightly different than what Rava was referring to, because it's saying that the entire world was preoccupied with his eulogy. Why do we care that the entire world was? We don't need the entire world to be distracted. We just need the people of Canaan to be distracted. This addition to the Gemara struck me as something strange and something that I wanted to think about to see if there's anything else that it's really adding to what's going on here. I don't think that the purpose of this Ika de Amre gives some historical or chronological context to when Iyov lived. The Gemara in Baba Basra lists many different opinions about when Iyov lived, with even one opinion saying that he never lived at all and is just a mashal. Even if you'd like to posit that this Ika de Amre is coming to put some historical context to when Iyov lived, I'd still ask, so what? Why do we need to know that? What is that adding to the discussion here? There's so many questions about the entire episode, but there are two questions that came to mind that may help explain what's being added here with the Iyov narrative. So the first question is, how is it possible that 12 Meraglim, who we know were men of distinction, you can refer to them more as dignitaries than actual military spies, how is it possible that 12 dignitaries made their way through the entire land of Canaan over the course of 40 days, sampling produce to bring back to show to everyone else, and not get noticed by the population, by the police force, by the military? It just seems so unlikely, especially when you contrast it to the other episode of sending spies that we're familiar with, when Yehoshua sends 2 spies to Jericho to seek out some information, and they're noticed that night and reported to the king. So it just begs the question, how did this work out? It just seems like it was a mission doomed from the start in terms of being caught. Another question that always bothered me was when Moshe Rabbeinu is recounting the event in Parshas Devarim, he tells us something that occurred that we weren't told about in Parshas Shlach. In Perek Aleph, Pasuk Chaf Zayin, Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Vatiragnu ba'alechem v'tomru," that you went around to all the different tents and slandered and said, "B'sinas Hashem osanu," because of Hashem's hatred for us, He took us out of Mitzrayim, "Laseis osanu b'yad ha'amori la'ashmidenu," to deliver us into the hand of the Amorim in order to destroy us. This just seems like a wild accusation on the part of the Meraglim. To say that the land is intimidating and that the people there seem impossible to conquer, and therefore we're scared and we can't do this and it's not going to work out. But to go ahead and completely distort their relationship with Hashem to such a degree where they're claiming that Hashem hates them and that's why He took them out of Mitzrayim and that's why He wants to bring them into Canaan to destroy them, that just seems absolutely ludicrous. How could they possibly say something like that? Now, if you were to ask me, is there a person in Tanakh that's depicted as viewing the events that occurs to him as a sign that God hates him? I would answer, that's Iyov. For example, Iyov says in Perek Gimel, Pasuk Chaf Daled, "Lama fanecha tastir, v'sachshiveni le'oyev lach." Why do you hide your face and consider me as an enemy to you? Another example is in Perek Tezayin, "Yifritzeni feretz al pnei feretz yarutz alai kegibor." He attacked me with one attack upon another. He charged at me like a warrior. This is what I would refer to as Iyov language, and it seems to be that this is the kind of language that the Meraglim were using as well. Sefer Iyov is famous for talking about the struggle of understanding human suffering. But Iyov isn't just responding to suffering that he thinks is unfair. He is committed to having an honest assessment in his mind of what's going on. And so he refuses to accept any of the excuses or the platitudes that his friends are offering him. And because of that, he really can only come to one conclusion, which is that he is the subject of divine hostility, that Hashem must be considering him as an enemy. Rabbi David Foreman once pointed out that the letters of Iyov's name, Aleph Yud Vav Beis, also spell Oyev. Right? Those two words are an anagram. Whether this is intentional or not, I think the point that Rabbi Foreman was trying to make was that Sefer Iyov isn't just about a person's reaction to suffering in his life, but also about how he processes that and how it affects the way that he views Hashem is relating towards him. I think that's what the Ika Amre is coming to point out. It's coming to tell us that the Meraglim interpreted events through what we might call an Iyov worldview. So the answer to the first question of how the Meraglim made it throughout Eretz Canaan and were not detected, so the Gemara takes that up right away. There's really only one answer to that, which is it had to have been Hashem's providence, Hashem's involvement in the affairs of Eretz Canaan at the time that prevented the Meraglim from getting caught. That's what the Gemara means when it says that Hashem arranged an act of chesed on behalf of the Meraglim, but they misinterpreted it and viewed it as something bad, as something to be scared of. So on one level, it's a question of misinterpreting what was going on around them. But the Igad Amri seems to be bringing in Iyov to explain to us what actually caused this failure to interpret the events properly. And it's that they seem to have adopted an Iyov worldview, where they were viewing themselves as the object of Hashem's hostility. Now, the experience of Iyov and the process that Iyov goes through is a legitimate experience for the average person. That is how the rest of the world experiences suffering and processes suffering and battles with what it means to them. And that's something that the entire world is involved in. But the point here is that the Dor HaMidbar was not like the rest of the world. The Dor HaMidbar experienced Chesed Hashem like never before and never since. They experienced the Makos, Yitzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, the Man, Ananei HaKavod, Har Sinai. They had been recipients of Chesed Hashem to such a degree that their worldview should have been completely different and risen above everybody else's. And so I think that's what the Igad Amr is coming to highlight to us. Why did the Meraglim misinterpret the Chesed Hashem in this case? Because they failed to rise above the experience that the rest of the world has. Whereas the rest of the world is distracted and burdened and struggling with the Iyov experience, the Dor HaMidbar, and certainly the Meraglim that went to scout out the land, should have been viewing everything through the lens of Chesed Hashem, because that is what they had experienced and that's what they know at this point. But because they adopted the worldview of everybody else, they looked at certain events and certain facts on the ground as an expression of Hashem's hostility towards them. B'sinas Hashem osanu. And so I'm suggesting that the Iyad Amre is not coming to fill in some historical facts about Iyov at this particular time, but it's coming to give us a framework for understanding what led to the misinterpretation of the Chesed Hashem in this particular case. The Dor HaMidbar failed to internalize the experiences that they had. They were supposed to use those experiences to appreciate the special relationship that Hashem had with them. But instead, they were using the worldview of everyone else. And that is a very unfortunate failure. In the next episode, I'd like to pivot to the mission that Yehoshua conducted with his two spies and take up a very puzzling Chazal, which claims that one of the spies was in fact Pinchas and that he was a malach who was invisible in the house of Rachav. See you on the next road trip.